3, 1, 2, 3. Uno, dos, tres, uno, dos, tres, probando. Uno, dos, tres. 1, 2, 3, probando. Uno, dos, tres. Uno, dos, tres. Uno, dos, tres, probando. Uno, dos, tres. Uno, dos, tres. Hello, everyone. My name is Nancy Giraldo. I'm a psychotherapist at Andelish Trauma Counseling and Consulting, and your presenter today of the topic principles, seven principles for making marriage work. As I said, the presentation is in the seven principles for making marriage work. This is based on research, scientific research by the Gottmans, that's a married couple, who wrote the book titled by the same name. It's important to kind of look at what are the scientific evidence to support this book and the what makes marriage work. And in reality, there is a lot of support for it. Actually, what Dr. Gottman was trying to accomplish was to find out we need to study couples and have research to know what makes them work. And what they did is that they had a group of scientists watching through a two view mirrors couples who were spending 24 hours in what they call the love map lab. And in the love lab, they were supposed to bring some groceries. The idea was that it was to be like a bed and breakfast. And they were just supposed to talk to each other, do regular things during that time. But they were going to be hooked up to monitors, ECGs, and to get the heart rate and all this. And very normal, right? Um, and they have studied over 3,000 couples in the span of over 40 years. And it is the results of those studies that it is used in the bestseller book, The Seven Principles for Making Marriage Work. So it is these seven principles that we're going to be using to answer several different questions. And so the first is, what makes marriage work? And before we get to that, let's go over first what are the main things that we're going to be talking about today. Let me move this a little bit to the side so you guys can see. There we go. And so the goals that we're going to try to meet in this hour is to describe the research, which we have done in part there, of the seven principles of making marriage work. And we are going to explain how these principles and these studies help predict divorce. And through their findings, they realized that there are several factors that are consistent with divorce couples that leads to this divorce. And we're going to talk about the four horsemen that Dr. Gottman talks about in his research that are directly tied to these predictive factors of divorce. Then we're going to describe what are emotionally intelligent marriages, and then what are the benefits of staying even in a marriage, and listing some myths uh, about marriage in general. So what makes marriage work? So what they find out, the interesting part, what they found out is that the couples who were taking part of this study, those who were what they call master couples and those who were disaster couples, if you will, that's not what they call them, but that's what I'm calling them, those who struggle and were not marriages that survive, had the same kind of problems, the same kind of issues that those that didn't. So there had to be something going on that made a difference for those who were master couples, those who actually made their relationships work. And in this instance, there were seven things that they found out that make the marriage work. The number one is that they had enhanced love maps. What does that mean? They knew each other. They knew about each other's dreams. They found out details about them. They knew the inner workings of the mind of their partners. So it's essential to know the other person. The other one was that they had fondness and admiration for the other person. They they like them. They like who they were married to, and they admire several components of them. And so they really like the person that they were with. And then these couples, when there were conflicts and there were situations that were difficult, instead of turning away from each other, they went to each other. They looked to the other person to resolve the issues instead of avoiding them. And then they allow the other person to influence them. I imagine what it is like to have another person that you tell them is, oh, they don't listen to me, they don't pay attention to what I'm saying, or it's like it went over their head and they didn't take the information I gave them seriously. So one of the things that they were able to do was to let their partners influence them. They listened to them, and if convinced of a change was needed, they did it because it was best for their relationship. The other thing is that these couples solved the problems that were solvable. And this is important to realize. Not all problems in relationships can be solved. And that doesn't mean that you have to end the relationship. But it's also important to recognize that problems that have solutions need to be solved. And these couples work towards solving the problems within the relationship. The other thing that they try to do, there are perennial problems in relationships where couples feel like they're always arguing about the same thing over and over again, and that they don't seem to get past the same issues. We call that gridlock. We're kind of stuck there and not moving forward. So master couples, as we're calling them, they need to overcome gridlock. They need to not ignore those issues, but to tackle them. And lastly, master couples created shared meaning. That means that they created rituals, they created activities that were meaningful for both members of the relationship to do together to increase the meaning of their relationship. And so Dr. Gottman, both Dr. Gottman created what they call the Sound Relationship House to kind of see how relationships work in the context of these 7 principles. And it basically tells you that if you have all these elements, it creates a sound and it strengthens the relationship, a sound relationship that is built on a good foundation. I like to look at it this way, the 2 columns to the side, trust and commitment, is critical. The 7 principles in the middle is part of that. But if you didn't have trust in a relationship, if you didn't have commitment, you can have anything that is in the middle of those 7 principles. You have to trust the other person to allow yourself to open yourself up to the other person and to feel known and want the other person to know the details about you. So without trust, you would not be able to open yourself up. And the other thing is, without commitment, how are you able to navigate through the process of relationship and all these 7 principles? You need to be committed. It's not easy. And commitment says, I'm going to stick it through. I'm going to go through this entire process and challenge myself and do things to promote our relationship growing. And I have to say that I'm really glad that you're here with us today because it shows that commitment, the commitment to making your relationship work. And so today, as we talk about why even stay in a marriage, we have to look at the different principles that help. And there's an essential component that is helpful to going through these 7 principles that we're using as being part of creating sound relationships. And that's emotionally intelligent marriages. So think for a second what we just went through. What is emotional intelligence? We talk about knowing each other, knowing the other person, sharing our inner world, admiring, and having funness with the other person. The reality is that takes an ability that is very critical, several abilities actually, that are very critical within the emotional intelligence. And that is the ability to emotionally regulate yourself, to manage your emotions, and not just only managing your own emotions and regulating them and being aware of them, but understanding those of another person. So imagine how critical this is in a marriage relationship. If you don't even know yourself and you don't have an awareness of your own feelings, let alone how you're going to be aware of another person's feelings. The wonderful thing is that emotional intelligence is not something that if you don't have it, whoops, tough luck, you're never going to be able to have it. The wonderful thing is that you can develop self-awareness, you can develop the ability to regulate yourself, you can develop the ability to motivate yourself, empathize with others, and have social skills. But look at how these are intricately linked with the 7 principles. So self-awareness. How does self-awareness impact love maps? Well, knowing myself allows me to share my inner world with my partner. Sometimes your partner might be saying, why this person doesn't tell me? And sometimes they go, well, I don't know how I feel. And sometimes that's true. We don't know how we feel. And we are detached from how we're feeling inside of ourselves. The other part of managing conflict is self-regulation. How I'm going to be in this moment where I want to blow up. This person is making me really angry. Why would I want to even regulate myself? So it's essential to really look at that, to really look at how we manage our emotions, what we do with them. The other factor is, like I said, those steps within that sound house require motivation, commitment. I'm going to stick this through. I'm going to do this because it's the most helpful thing for my marriage. The other element, empathy. If we don't have empathy is about the ability to put yourself in the shoes of another person, to see things from their perspective. In marriage, this is hard at times because we are like, oh, I just want that person to understand me. I want that person to get what I'm saying. Why do I have to listen to them first? I'm the one who's struggling right now. We have all those things coming in and saying that. Well, the truth is that sometimes we can say, well, I understand. I'm not bringing that information to them in a way that I would like to listen to myself if I was in the middle of this conversation. So it's important to see how empathy is crucial as well. And lastly, social skills. Well, social skills are critical. It's about, how do I listen to people? How do I pay attention to people? How do I read critical nonverbal cues so I can respond accordingly? So as you can see, emotional intelligence is critical in helping marriages succeed. So how we can embrace this within marriage? We move this a little so you can see again. And so embracing emotional intelligence in marriage. This is how it looks like. The ability to say yes to the other person's needs. We want people to say yes to us. But what about us saying yes to them? Sometimes we just want to say no until I get something. If you give me this, I'll give you that. But no, it's the ability to say, I'm here for you. Yes, what do you need? The second thing about embracing emotional intelligence in marriage is having a positive attitude. If we're constantly negative, if we're constantly complaining, and there's no positive in the relationship, it is hard to be romantic. It is hard to have fun. It is hard to have adventures. And we all want romance, fun, and adventure in relationships, but that only comes if we're in a positive place. I like to recommend couples when I'm working in couples therapy at the beginning of the start of therapy to go out, have your dates. I think it's essential that every couple goes once a week on a date. uninterrupted, not with children, not talking about things from work or problems at all. Just relax and have fun. That can cultivate more of a positive attitude. The other thing that is important to embrace is I'm aware of what the feelings of my partner is and what are their needs. And that involves continually asking questions, saying, how are you doing? I even suggest that couples have once a week family sessions where, and I mean not sessions in therapy, but where they come together and they have positive interaction, but they check in with each other and know what their feelings are and what their needs are, where they're struggling, and they ask for what they need and making it intentional. I really think that all these things that Gottman is talking about, all these principles, has to do with intentionality. Marriages to succeed require purposeful trust and commitment that is intentionally building these skills to fortify, strengthen, and enhance the relationship. So this approach of emotional intelligence and all the things that we're talking about, it strengthens your marriage, but not only that, it has been predictors of future success of children. So see children in families who have very good emotional intelligence have higher awareness and higher IQ because they themselves are more aware about themselves and the world around them. So emotional intelligence basically fosters strong, respectful, understanding family bonds. You want to have a good family? It's not about that you never have conflict. It's not about that you're always positive either. It's about respect. It's about understanding. It's about listening to each other, providing feedback about your needs, and validating the other person's needs in the relationship. So, a recipe for disaster. The four horsemen of the apocalypse. Watch this.
What an idiot.
It's not my fault we're always late.
Forget it.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the four horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So, what can you do? Practice the following four research-based antidotes. There is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first three horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes, calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction.
So as you can see, the top four horsemen, that is where things get tricky. And you probably have recognized that we all perhaps at some point do this, but a constant doing these behaviors can definitely wreak havoc in a relationship. Criticism. Who likes criticism? Nobody likes criticism. The problem is that we have a tendency to do that. And we even say, oh, but I'm giving constructive criticism. I personally think that constructive criticism is an oxymoron, because what is constructive about criticism and the definition of itself is a judgment, negative, not judgment in another person. Feedback and criticism are quite different. Feedback says, why so, oh, that's a terrible shirt. Ooh, this all wrinkle. And feedback is, you know, the shirt will look better if you iron it before you put it on. There's a difference. That a person might listen to the same way, that and a nicer way said with criticism has to do with a verbal, their own critic inside their head. But criticism tends to be very destructive. So instead, use gentle startup. So one of the predictors of divorce is how often couples have harsh startup, like, what are you doing? Why do you have to always talk that way? Instead of, I understand you're upset. I've really hurt my feelings. This is what I need so we can get past this. The other one is defensiveness. It's hard not to be defensive if you're going to see that these kind of have a pairing to each other. When you're criticized, the other person can end up being defensive. I don't know anybody who just when criticized is just very easily try and not be defensive. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction, right? You kind of have to catch yourself and do not go in that direction. You need to stop yourself. So defensiveness, as the video just said, is a form of blaming the person. Really, it's not taking responsibility. So the important way of an antidote for defensiveness is taking responsibility. But you might say, oh, hey, hold on. Why do I have to take responsibility? I didn't do anything wrong. I think that in every situation, there is an aspect that you perhaps can take responsibility. You don't have to take responsibility for everything. Take responsibility for the part you played in that specific situation. So, for example, you're always late. You never come late. Come on time. You're always late. The defensive part is like, no, it's like you all do it right all the time either. It's kind of blaming back, defensive, right? Taking responsibility. No, you're right. Sometimes I'm late, because everybody, even the most punctual person, can say at some point you have been late. You don't take responsibility for every time you're late, because nobody is all the time late. So it's having a balance between being defensive and actually taking responsibility for part of the situation that you feel that you're really responsible for. The other thing, contempt. This one is big for divorce. Contempt is, I don't like you. If you go back to the sound house and you have fondness and admiration and allowing influence, 2 of the 7, those 2 and positive attitude there as well are critical. And when you hear contempt, you have to wonder, do you even like this person? Because you're putting down that person. Contempt is about, you're underneath me. I'm above you. How can you admire somebody you don't respect? So contempt is another one that is very, very detrimental to a marriage. So what to do in those moments? Contempt happens sometimes because you feel attacked and you feel like you need to demean the other person to gain the upper hand. But instead of describing your parents by saying, oh, you're an idiot, you describe your own feelings and your needs. This is what I need in this situation. I need you to listen to me. I'm feeling unheard. I'm feeling hurt. Going ahead and saying, describing your thoughts, your feelings, and your needs, and not describing the other person in demeaning ways. And lastly, stonewalling. Stonewalling is like I'm just gonna sit here and pretend I'm not hearing you, totally quiet, not emotional response, just straightforward looking at you. And that usually happens. It's not because the person doesn't care. It's not because that person is don't feel anything. It's that person is flooded. And what is being flooded? Flooded is when your emotional system, your central nervous system has been hijacked. And your parasympathetic system, that's a system that regulates the firing alarm and stresses you out because you need to survive. And so you're flooded. Your body feels hijacked with emotion. You're totally overwhelmed by everything that's happening. You are shutting down. So the best way to deal with stonewalling is by self-soothing. So self-soothing takes a little while. I really recommend taking time away from your partner when you become flooded. You might say something along the lines, I'm overwhelmed, I'm flooded, I need some time. I can get back to this conversation later, but I need some time right now. And later can be later tonight or something, but not less than 20 minutes. Because in their studies, they found out that couples who were flooded and they were then having to go for 20 minutes and relax, read a magazine, do something else, and understand and take a time out from the discussion, they took at least 20 minutes to calm down. And the other thing is that you cannot take those 20 minutes to go over there and reminisce and sit there like we can do for days, even if we're upset. We can sit there and go like, oh, she's such a this, he's such a that. No, you actually take it yourself. Breathe in, breathe out, walk outside, do several things, get to know what soothes you so you can actually really stop the overwhelming way of going down the hill with your body being hijacked. So you might say, well, that sounds like a lot. Why on earth should I save my marriage? Well, aside from what I would say, obvious reasons, divorce is expensive. That shouldn't be a reason not to stay in a bad marriage either. There are actually benefits to staying married. You know, what happens many times with couples is that they get used to things. They get in a rut. We go up, go to work, take care of the kids. On the weekend, we might go to church and we might go and have some fun. But we do the same thing over and over. It's not until later when we are away by ourselves that we realize, I miss this. I miss the days that we had this bond. You know, one of the things that is important, and I know many times that we think, oh, we got married and it was great before we get married. Not all marriages start well, even in a good place before they get married. So they might not have had a good marital bond to even reminisce and romanticize about in the past. So the benefit of marriage is that it provides that opportunity to be there and have someone who understands you, somebody who knows you're in a world, that you're not alone. Ultimately, a lot of the issue with divorce, it has to do with the fact that we're lonely. It's really hard to be lonely when you're married. Not because it's hard to be, but it's difficult to accept. I'm married, I have all this responsibility, and I feel so alone. The other thing is the misconceptions about divorce. We actually have normalized it, like, oh, everybody gets divorced. I mean, the majority of people, or 50% of marriages don't divorce. That's normal, right? That's the way to solve problems. If we don't work out and we're not compatible, it's better to go our ways, separate ways, and not continue to deal with this situation. But divorce is difficult. It has its own stressors and challenges. Just because it's normalized today, normalized, not normal, but normalized, doesn't mean that it's the best thing for everybody. The other thing is physical health benefits. Do you know that people who are married live 4 to 8 years more than those who end up divorcing? That's a significant amount of time. So there are emotional and psychological advantages to it. People who are healthy, and let's be real, we're not talking about any marriage, difficult conflict, or what, and terrible marriage, an abusive marriage, for example. I'm talking about marriages who have these 7 components, who are emotionally intelligent, who have positive things going on for themselves, and are practicing these principles. They have these emotional and psychological advantages. They have the protective factor from stress and from difficulties in life because they're able to totally allow themselves to be in that moment with the other person. They have somebody to talk to. And so it has impact in the physical well-being of the individual. The other thing is it has impact on children. Children of divorce have more emotional issues than children of not. And again, there's nuances to the research, and the nuances for the research is if they grew up in an abusive home where they were seeing things like that, that of course has a greater negative impact. But there's children who end up being, all of a sudden the parents showed up and say, we're getting a divorce, and the kids had no idea because they didn't see their parents having a major problem. They thought everything was okay. So there are definitely good benefits to staying within a relationship. So one of the things that I would say is if you're able to work on things, if you're both willing, trust and commitment is what we're talking about, it will be very helpful to get some therapy, get some help if you don't have these elements that are critical for your relationship. It's so good for your health that the Gottman said, I often think that if fitness buffs spend just 10% of their weekly workout, say 20 minutes a day, working on their marriage instead of their bodies, they will get 3 times the health benefits they derive from exercise, class, or treadmill. You realize that what he's saying is having a good marriage, working towards a healthy marriage that has all the 7 components with trust and commitment can have significant health benefits that are more important than exercise itself. Isn't that something? Isn't that worth fighting for as well? The benefits that I can have for you? There's some myth about marriages and that create problems in relationships. For example, we think, well, if I have personality problem or my partner has a personality problem or they're neurotic, that's going to ruin our marriage. Again, if you look at the Sound House, what it's talking about is not that couples have problems or didn't have problems with neurotic or personality problems or mental health issues or anything. All couples had all those things. They had neurotic partners, personality issues with partners. But even those couples who succeeded despite of the things because they use these components. They use the 7 principles to enhance their relationship and build a sound relationship. The other myth is that we have the same interest to keep us together. And this one I hear a lot because, we have to be completely compatible and go, if I like this kind of movies, they have to like this kind of movies, and this or that, we have to be in agreement on everything. Well, it's nice to have things common interest in. Obviously, you need to have some common interests to do things, but it is not what keeps you together. I mean, you can go, let's say you both love to vacation, and you go all the way to your favorite country place and whatever, and you're still miserable there and fighting with each other, even though you like what you're doing and it's both of your interests. It doesn't take away the problem. The other thing about marriage, and this is critical to understand, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Like it's an exchange relationship. In other words, I'm going to give you as much as you give me. And if you don't give me, I don't give you. And where does a cycle begin and where does a cycle end? I mean, really, where you can, who begins giving? And I personally think that it kind of ruins what love is, my definition of love, that is not about taking or giving. It's about loving and doing loving acts. And that's about kind of going back to the love maps. It says, the more I know you, the more I admire you and have fondness for you, the more positive feelings I have about you, the more I want to give to you because I feel love for you because I admire the person I am with. So again, marriage is not an exchange of resources to be given and taken. The other one is avoiding conflict will ruin your marriage. You know, conflict is part of marriage and it looks different in every relationship. The truth is that you can have a highly conflictual marriage according to your view, and they're totally fine in their relationship. And according to your view, oh, these people have no marital conflict, and they're not good. So it really is about how you handle the conflict. And even about how you're okay, with the conflict or not. If our family is okay with handling conflict by having passive conclusions about conversations about things, that's fine. If your family has to have a little bit of a give and take and loud because your family is loud, because some families are just loud, that's fine too. It's not exactly about avoiding conflicts entirely. You don't create conflicts all the time, or it's how you handle it. And how you handle it is depending on your family and how good it is for you, the way, both of you, that you're dealing with it in that way. The other thing is that we believe that the root of all divorces are affairs. And I want you to listen to me clearly because the important component that I'm going to say here is that it's not about excusing affairs. But the truth is that sometimes, and many times, affairs begin because there were problems already in the relationship. Although that may be true, it doesn't excuse the relationship, the thing. I personally think, if you are not happy in the relationship and you feel that you are going to be outside the relationship, go ahead, step outside the relationship. It might be more beneficial for you to step outside the relationship completely and divorce and do that. But before it gets to that, because many times it's before it gets to that, how are you going to decide, am I going to fight for this marriage or I'm just going to go away? Sometimes we feel stuck in a relationship because we're not going anywhere. Oh, I'm done emotionally. It is too hard to tell them, and it's better to do this. But you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your relationship. So there might be problems there already. And again, I'm going to say not all affairs is because there were something problems. I mean, there's people who have sexual addictions, who you could be the greatest person on earth and they have this issue and there's nothing you can do because you didn't create it, you didn't cause it, and you cannot heal it. So it's very important to know a distinction between these two. And lastly, another myth, and I think part of this myth has to do with a book about that has very good points, but it's important to understand that it says men and women are from different planets. But does that mean that relationships don't work because they're different planets from different planets? Actually, these masters couples who were all the time doing well in their relationships, they were different. They were from different planets, and they make the relationship work. So again, relationships can have a lot of challenges, mental health issues, personality issues, differences, different type of conflict, being from different planets, if you will. But the reality is that does not matter. A marriage can still work if people put trust and commitment and those 7 principles to enhance their relationship. So what can you do to enhance your relationship? Well, here on the screen is our phone number to our office. There's an email, and there's also links to our site. Those are actually the URL addresses to our site. We have couples therapy available. We have therapists that are available utilizing different approaches, not just parts of the Gottman method, but different approaches according to the needs of each couple. Doing weekly sessions or we also offer intensives, and that's when couples needs. I often find that an hour is not enough, and we might need 3 hours, 6 hours intensives. Insurance doesn't cover those. Insurance might not even cover the one-on-one sessions, depending on your insurance. But we provide those services. And right there, you will see Couples Retreat at andtheleash.com. The Couples Retreat is one that is over the weekend. We offer payment plans for the Couples Retreat. And we offer a variety, not just the Gottman plans. Gottman method, we focus on how to develop your emotional intelligence and other things that are essential for your relationship. So give us a call, shoot an email if you have any question. Go to couplesretreat.andtheleash.com and find out about the Couples Retreat, or go to andtheleash.com and request an appointment for either individual individual sessions for couple therapy, or the intensives of 3 or 6 hours, or sign up for the Couples Retreat. Like I said, for the Couples Retreat, we do offer plans. So go ahead and write info@andtheleash.com, or if you want more information about the Couples Retreat, at andtheleash.com is the email address. You can even ask if you want a Couples Retreat just for you and your spouse. We can set that up as well. Well, we're glad that you were able to join us today. I hope this information helped. This is just an introduction, just to see what you can do about that. Your relationship can be safe if you're both willing to do so. It will not be easy, but it will be rewarding as you enhance your relationship. See you next time. Bye.